Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the public universities are in crisis, but first, President Biden visit Pennsylvania, as they say. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, the first weekend in April, I got that right. Spring is coming fast. You wouldn't know it from the weather. Is that correct, John Micek?
It's a little blustery out there this morning, Terry. It's not very springy.
Well, the guy sitting across from me is a frequent guest on the program. His name is John Micek. He's the editor-in-chief of Pennsylvania Capital Star. We'll put his Twitter handle up. You can follow him. Quickly, Pennsylvania Capital Star, explain it to our folks. We are an
all-digital news site that covers Pennsylvania state government politics. We're a nonprofit outlet, part of the state's newsroom network, 21 sites. Just opened an outlet in Idaho this past week, so welcome to the Idaho Capital Sun. We're growing. A couple more coming online before the end of the year. You can find us at Penn Capital. It's tal-star.com.
Yeah, and they'll put your personal, you forward a lot of stuff. Obviously, I follow you. All right, we'll get down to business. All right, President Biden comes to Pennsylvania. That's not, in many ways, not unexpected. It's the tipping point state, and he loves to talk about something, namely Scranton, Pennsylvania, where he was born and lived until he was 10.
He never brings that up. The president came to Pittsburgh this past week, Terry, his second visit in as many weeks, to roll out an ambitious $2 trillion infrastructure program, roads, bridges, electrical grid, broadband expansion, part of this hugely ambitious American rescue plan that he's envisioning. It's going to be a tough road in Congress. There are some progressives who are expressing reservations. Republicans obviously are dubious about the price tag, including Pat Toomey. Important that he came to Pennsylvania, as you said. This is where he kicked off his campaign. It's where he ended it last November when he carried the state in its 20 electoral votes. He was in Delaware County a couple of weeks ago. The Philly suburbs, of course, very important. They delivered the White House for him, and symbolic as well, because he was talking about his COVID plan. Delaware County, one of those counties that have been struggling with the pandemic.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, when he was a U.S. Senator in 1972 to when he became Vice President, I'll tell you, he visited the state frequently. I mean, I used to joke and say, maybe we ought to give him residence in the state. He's here so much.
The senator from Scranton, the second senator from Scranton, sure, yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. All right, the fact of the matter is that here, and I know you're acutely aware of this, his job performance has remained above 50%. It's dropped a couple of points, but it's still, 52, 53% positive overall. He scores very high on handling coronavirus. He scores above 50% on handling the economy. The shortcoming in terms of his job, of what he does, his job performance is literally what's going on at the border, which is, I think, politically hurting him now.
Yeah, I mean, those are numbers that Donald Trump would have killed for at any point during his presidency. He never got above 50%. I mean, the public elected Joe Biden for a reason. They wanted him to fix the economy. They wanted him to fix the pandemic. And that's what he's been doing. I mean, there is no doubt that there is a serious problem for the administration at the border with this seasonal influx. And that's what this is, Terry. It's in part that there's a new administration, but it's also this seasonal influx of migrants, particularly unaccompanied minor children, that they're really not prepared to deal with. And it goes to the broader weaknesses of American immigration policy, the failure over this last decade or more to come to any consensus on any meaningful fix. So in as much as Joe Biden is taking the heat for this is a failure of leadership by Congress by not being able to pass anything realistic. The House passed that Dreamers bill a couple of weeks ago, sitting over in the Senate. Not clear if it's going to get the votes in the Senate. But this is sort of more broadly indicative of the intractability of trying to reach accord on immigration reform.
Yeah, I mean, I think most Americans support immigration, at least in the polls that I've seen. But
they want a path to citizenship for the Dreamers. They want something done in immigration. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and it ought to be legal. We ought to, people ought to be tested because a number of people are coming with the coronavirus. Then we have these drug lords and other gang members that are bringing children and then releasing them immediately. I mean, it's heartbreaking when you just see what's going on there. Again, I'm for immigration, but it just can't be what's going on at the border.
Well, I mean, again, that goes to the sort of intractability of this problem. It's heartbreaking seeing those children. And the good part about it is that they're not those horrible scenes we saw in the previous administration. They're being treated humanely. Right. They're being treated well. But something's got to be done.
All right, we're going to a break. When we come back, there is no doubt that one of the big problematic situations that is emerging, and maybe I won't even say problematic because it's real, is the situation with mail-in balloting. I want to talk about that with you, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, sitting across from me is John Micek. He's the editor-in-chief of Pennsylvania Capital Star. We're talking about a bunch of issues that are relevant and important to the residents of Pennsylvania. All right, John Micek, in our state, we had a bipartisan passage of mail-in voting. As I like to say, Biden's voters, 3 and 4, voted by mail. Trump's supporters, 2 and 3, voted in person. But it did pass in a bipartisan way. And though there was some fraud, there's no doubt that it wasn't widespread. I'm not going to say here and there was a bit of it. And the Pennsylvania legislature and the governor, it seems to me, ought to get together and review the law and strengthen it where necessary. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, let's get this out of the way. First of all, the fraud was non-existent. It was, if there was anything that took place, it was statistically insignificant and did not impact the outcome one way or the other. We know that voters liked the convenience of mail-in balloting, as evidenced by the number, something like 3.2 million Pennsylvanians voted that way in the 2020 elections. Look, there were wrinkles, there were hiccups. There is no doubt that the governor and the legislature need to get together and address those. The county officials were appearing before, I believe it's the Senate State Government Committee last week, asking for help ahead of the municipal elections this November. It's important to remember, Terry, that this too is an election year. There is no off year for elections.
We also have one on May 18th.
There's the primary, but there is no off year for elections. Very important. Municipal offices and county offices and judicial and county offices on the ballot this year. But what we are seeing across a number of states, including Pennsylvania, is a coordinated attack on access to the polls. There's one bill in Pennsylvania sponsored by Representative Jim Gregory, Republican of Blair County, who wants to eliminate the mail-in voting law entirely. He wants to repeal that. We saw what happened in Georgia a couple of weeks ago that's caused such an outrage. Limits on voting hours, a ban on providing food and water at the polls, new voter ID requirements for absentee ballots as well. There are implications to that. One of them, and we've seen this in Tennessee, is a decrease in participation.
Let me tell you what I think, and you respond to it. I think that we had a record turnout, obviously a record number. We had absentee ballots. We still do. You need a specific reason for that. Mail-in ballot, you don't. And I think what basically happened was that election officials just got overwhelmed. I mean, you know what I mean? They got overwhelmed by the mail-in ballots. And remember, they weren't allowed to process them until Election Day. And
that was a failure that needs to be fixed as well.
Absolutely.
That pre-canvassing deadline needs to be fixed.
You're exactly right. I argued that 2 to 3 weeks in advance, there ought to be a processing of those ballots with Democratic and Republican poll watchers and observers not sitting 100 yards away, but literally at the same table. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, obviously, they were precluded from doing that in November because of pandemic conditions. They were in the room, they were allowed to watch. Governor Wolf sought, I think, a 21-day pre-canvassing window, was willing to come down to about 15. It got cut down to, unfortunately, just the morning of Election Day. And when you have that many absentee or mail-in ballots, coming in, you are inevitably going to get overwhelmed. That pre-canvassing window has to be extended.
But mail-in balloting's here to stay. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the numbers, Terry. It's overwhelmingly popular. People want it. Yeah. Whatever you can do, I think, to make it easier for people to vote, to increase access is a good thing.
But I hope that Governor Wolf and the Pennsylvania legislature, which is Republican controlled, sit down and work out reasonable, regional compromises to what's necessary.
Maybe a little bit of time before May, that may well happen.
Yeah. All right, thanks for coming on the program. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about the crisis in public education, the state system of higher education, and the president of APSCUF responds, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, the public universities in crisis, translation, the state system of higher education. Joining me is Jami Martin. She's the president of the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. Hello, Jami Martin.
Hello, Terry Madonna. How are you?
I'm fine. First of all, as I say all the time, I've been in higher education my whole adult life. I'm an alum from Millersville University, spent many years on the faculty. I held Jami Martin's position at one point in my career. So I'm not exactly neutral on this, and people need to understand that, but I'll try to ask questions as objectively as I can. All right, there's a big brouhaha going on between the faculty, coaches, and other people in the state system, I should say, and the chancellor, Daniel Greenstein. And before I get into that, the specifics of that, Jami, talk a little bit about the change that has taken place within the public universities in our state over the last couple years in terms of the student population and the funding. These are all very important elements to understanding the crisis that's going on in the 14 publicly owned universities in the state.
Well, I mean, if you might talk a little bit about the enrollments, a narrative out there, Terry, is that our enrollments have declined over the last 10 years. And that's a true statement. But what I want to emphasize is if you go back to a 20-year period and look from 2000 till now, we have the same number of students now as we did then. And so what's happened is they took the high water mark, if you will, and they've been looking at the trend line since then. And so our enrollments, they've varied, but really we're seeing pretty much just a normal flow, if you will. With regard to the funding, and we had an issue a couple of weeks ago with the chancellor being before the Appropriations Committee. And during that time made a statement regarding dissolving the system. And I don't want to focus on that. But our members are also unhappy about what was not said, which is we have 14 remarkable universities. You're an alum of Millersville, me, IUP. They're economic drivers in the communities in which they are housed. We have amazing programs, amazing departments, and our students go on to do amazing things, remarkable things, and become the working folks in our state. They're the ones that are going to be impacted by some of these changes. And when we are 47th in the nation in funding for public higher education, that becomes a major concern for all of us.
Yeah, let's talk about that a minute. I think that's particularly important because flat funding, not uncommon. Maybe we'll have to see if the 1.9 trillion stimulus package delivers some money to public higher education. Maybe you know that at this point. But the fact of the matter is that there's just simply, the funding has been inadequate. Now, again, I may have a bias here towards the public universities, but objectively, it's hard to say that the funding has kept up with inflation, kept up with the needs that exist within the public universities.
Yeah, and we need somebody to advocate for more funding for the system. And I've heard the chancellor, to be fair to him, he's talked about the fact that we're 47th in the nation in funding for higher education, but he does it with kind of a hands up or resigned approach. He hasn't gone in and actually advocated for more funding of the state legislature, asking for a 2% increase the last 2 years. That's the first time that's ever happened, going back to the very first chancellor, that we've seen somebody ask for that little. So we do need an advocate. And one other thing that I want to point out, if I could just quickly, we're not a business. We're not expected to be profitable. I mean, if you think of the police in your area, the firefighters, the EMS, we don't expect them to be profitable. We hope that they're there whenever we need them and call on them. And the state universities, they're founded on the notion of providing a high quality, affordable education. They need to be there for our Pennsylvania students.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I want to point out that the state system is the largest provider of higher education in the state. Let's start with that fact. And then when we come back, here's the question. Is it, given what the chancellor said, and it was a threat to dissolve the system, we have to put that on the record. The fact of the matter is that it now will make it harder to recruit students. And how about athletes? I mean, all the athletic programs that are very, very important to the students in particular at our universities. We'll be back and talk about that subject and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, I'm talking with Jami Martin. She's the president of the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. We're talking about the more than just the chancellor's statement to the state legislature, actually to a committee of the legislature about dissolving the system if this can't be worked out. But I'll tell you one of the things that really, in a sense, is worrisome. You're out trying to recruit students, you're out trying to recruit faculty when replacements are necessary, and the universities are out recruiting athletes, coaches. That can't be good to make that kind of a statement.
And that was one of the things that was most upsetting, talking to colleagues who are going through open houses and expos or whatever they're called on a campus, trying to recruit the next class of the fall 2021 freshman class. And that really put a damper on those efforts. I mean, if I'm a mother of a high school senior, am I going to choose to send my son or daughter to Millersville if it might not be there? And even for our current students, they're scared. They're worried. Am I going to be able to finish my degree?
Sure.
Or is this system going to disappear? For the student athletes, there's a concern right now with the consolidation efforts as to whether or not those universities that are slated for consolidation will have all of their athletic programs. But even at the other schools, and if I'm a student athlete, am I going to commit to a university where my team may not be in existence next year?
No, you're exactly right. The other aspect of this is if you go around the state and you look at these universities, in many cases, they're the second, the third, the fourth largest employer in the particular county in which they are located. So not only does it give an opportunity for students who live in the, in the region where the university is located, where they might not be able to afford to go anywhere else, to improve their lives, you also have the problem of what the closing of these universities would mean to the economies of the region in which they're located. And let's face it, that's all we hear now when we talk, when we get into discussions about the legislature and what the governor's going to do. Improve the economy, improve the economy. Well, how are you improving the economy if you shut down one of the largest employers in many counties?
Absolutely. And the state system did a study a number of years ago and found that for every dollar invested in the state system, the return on investment is $10. So I don't know who wouldn't want to have that kind of an investment. But the other part is the loss of tax revenue. So not only are they not pumping money in, they're going to be losing money in tax revenue. It could impact the real estate market. So all of those negative impacts, if one of these universities would go away, or we'd see a dramatic decrease in enrollment because of concerns about dissolving the system.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt when students graduate, now more than ever, they tend to move out of the area in which they're located. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that they've graduated gives them an opportunity for employment that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And I don't get the sense that that's emphasized as much as it should be. Not only the economy of the region, but what it does to these students who couldn't afford perhaps to go anywhere else. Some of whom can live at home, but they live on the university, on the campus as well. And then you have what it is, how important it is for their future.
Correct. And there was a rationale when the system was formed where these universities were placed. We have Edinburgh in the far northwest, and then Cheney and Westchester in the far southeast. California to East Stroudsburg. There was a reason for that, to make higher education actually accessible for students who may not be able to leave the region in which they live. And the fact of the matter is we have, also a huge alumni network. And so for students who are graduating, they have connections with students who came before them. And even if a student leaves the region, they're still putting money into the economy. So I think you're right. We're losing sight of the purpose and the access opportunities for students who otherwise could not go to a university. And we're both products of that system. Yeah.
Well, we're out of time, but you'll comment on and you'll keep us posted so we have a sense about where all this is going to go. But it's not going to be easy, but I remain optimistic. All right, thank you.
I do as well.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.